Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Huddle. Happy Huddle.
Yeah, happy Huddle.
I got it. Welcome to Wednesday. We're so glad y'all are here. We have a special guest today with us for a kind of a special edition Huddle.
Yes.
Some of you may not realize, but April is Autism Awareness Month. And so Laura Mercado, that some of you may or may not know, but you probably definitely know her parents, right? Alvin and Marie Mercado. I mean, you guys have all been here for years and years and how many years? Do you know?
Oh, well, for me, I think I've been here for about 10 years.
Okay.
But I think my parents have been here since I think the 80s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds right.
And
Yes.
Brother Alvin does all the things. He helps with baptism ministry. He's just always, he helps out with LifeWise groups, right? With the helping different people who can't do stuff around their house or their yard or need assistance with Brother David Pardo.
Yes.
They're amazing. But Laura and I have been walking together for a while, just meeting occasionally. And so tell us a little bit about you, Laura, and why we brought you on, I guess, so that I'll let you kind of lay that out.
Yes. Well, I am a mother of 2 children.
Yes.
Amazing.
And they are a blessing, and they really are a miracle.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I have a daughter whose name is Abigail, and she's 4 years old. And I have a son whose name is Aaron, and he's 3 years old. And the reason why I'm on here is when my daughter was 2 years old, she was diagnosed with autism.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to share what I thought about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, just, it's many challenges, but it's also many blessings.
Right.
Yes.
So it's been 2 years only that you've known?
Yes. 2 years, but,
You knew.
I knew. Yeah. So you get
Yeah.
to a point where
Gotcha.
you're like, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Then once the diagnosis happens, you're like, it happened.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Let's push on that for a second. So is there anything that you'd like us to know, or just tell us about that thing of like, but you don't. That's, I feel like that is such a shared experience between parents.
Yeah.
Whether or not
Yes.
we're dealing with a specific diagnosis.
Whatever the diagnosis.
There's
might
that
be.
feeling in the pit of your stomach when you know something, but no one has said it out loud yet. So,
Well, I'll share. Share what happened was Abigail was developing normally until she was 1 year old, and at that time, I realized there was a regression that had happened with her skills, and all of the skills that we've worked on and she's developed just kind of stopped, and it was a overnight experience.
wow.
But of course, at that time, it was during COVID, and so I was in complete denial of that. That something was going on. However, I did know that she needed help, so I started going to the doctors right away and started some early intervention for walking, for speech therapy at that time, because she stopped socializing, stopped imitating sounds, or she just kind of went quiet.
Suddenly,
Yes.
Wow.
And so within a year, it was a few months of me just kind of saying like, what's going on? What's happening? And finally I had to just, stop. And I said, okay, she needs help. I allowed myself to have those feelings. And I said, I need to search for the help.
Yeah.
So it was during COVID again. And, it was hard to get the early intervention for her. But every time I would take her to a therapist, they said, we believe she does have autism.
Yeah.
And I said, well, she's, not doing, the hand flapping, for
Yeah.
example.
Right.
She doesn't have autism.
Right.
Then the next day it felt like she started the hand flapping.
Yeah.
She's not doing the spinning. She doesn't have autism. Next day she does the spinning. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had to come to a point of acceptance,
Yeah.
And I allowed myself to have those, again, those feelings. But I also said, I need to just accept this.
Right.
Yes. And make it, actually, one night I told myself, if I'm going to be an autism mom, I'm going to be the best autism mom I can.
course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow, yeah.
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 That tracks, having known you for a long time.
Yes.
I remember too when you came to me and told me, like, first there was when she quit talking,
Yeah.
and we kind of talked about that. I remember that very well. But I remember too, whenever you told me like, okay, I got the diagnosis, and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were basically like, I took a minute to like grieve that.
Yes.
Because it was really hard to hear that your child was going to have the challenge of it. Not that you care, we love our children, but you knew the challenge ahead for her.
Yes.
And you were like, I just took a moment to do that, but now I'm just going to embrace it because it gives me all the tools I need to know what she needs.
Absolutely.
And watching you like just kind of verbalize that, but then actively do that. I mean, it was really powerful to watch you. And like every time you would come back to me, you're like, well, I've learned this, and this about how to help her. And then I remember you calling me one day and being like, Brooke, she said, was it mama, or it was mom, or it was something it was her one of the first words that she had said. You were like, she's like talking or mimicking.
Yeah, she was saying mom.
Yes.
Mama. Yes.
And you were like, just the joy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because I went 2 years with, not hearing much, after that. And, with all the work, I remember we were in speech therapy, and with all the, sometimes I'd be there and I said, what is this for? This is not working, and I just had to continue it and fight through it. And when I continued it, all of a sudden, something just clicked.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I want to share, that, early intervention, is very important when it comes. Yes, it's key because it may not feel like it's working, but at the end, it really will come together.
Yeah.
Yes.
So in other words, if somebody has been sitting with that denial, you're saying basically
there's freedom and
yes.
Yeah, and I think you're saying, and I would want to be careful in how I underscored this and straighten me out if I'm not getting it right. But I think you're saying not that anyone should feel bad or guilty that they've had that, because that's the most human of responses. And a lot of times we don't see ourselves until somebody kind of points a mirror at us, which is why we wanted to sit down with you.
Right.
But if somebody were to realize in hearing you talk, yeah, that's me. I've been doing that of saying like, well, this isn't, there's not this tick, or I don't see my kid stimming in this way or whatever.
Yeah.
And recognize that and go, I think I'm in denial. There's no reason to get, to be hard on yourself, because that's just the human experience. But I think what you're saying is there will never be a better time than today to acknowledge it.
Yes.
And face it.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And, I want to say that there are still challenges, there will always be challenges, and I've accepted that, but I think as for me, and I encourage anybody else to kind of to start their day with power thoughts, and knowing that, you can do it. You can go through the challenges.
Yeah.
And that's something that, is easier said than done. But, sometimes that's all you have is just, your power thoughts and, your prayers and, just saying, I am enough to get through this and be a parent of an autistic child. Right. And I can do this,
So for those of us who may not quite really understand a good working definition of what autism is, could you kind of like really just educate us, and like, I know you've done the research, just so that we can all really come into your understanding of what you've already kind of discovered about it?
Yes. So I actually was looking up a few definitions because it seems like there's been different ones in different websites, but the one that really kind of hit for me was it's a developmental disability that can affect someone's social interactions, communications, and behaviors. So for my personal walk with Abigail, she does have, for her communication, she is nonverbal at the time being. She's using minimal words, but, she does communicate through a tablet now, and that's amazing to see that.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So with the social interactions, though, I was telling Brooke that sometimes they have different difficulties in different social environments. They can become like sensory overloaded with like lights, sounds, music, people touching them, and you may see them having meltdowns from that. But that was really like I think a definition that definitely helps.
That's good.
No, I love that you kind of like really bullet pointed those things: communication, social interactions, and behavior. That kind of goes back to what you were saying. It makes so much more sense for you to go ahead and proverbially rip the Band-Aid off to know
Yeah.
as early as possible, so that way you can be the advocate for your baby.
Right.
If they're having a trouble, communicating, or they're having, like you said, a meltdown in a situation where there's sensory overload, they're in a situation where the lights are triggering something and the sound is triggering.
Yes.
The more we know, the more we could
Right.
protect them and advocate for
Yeah.
them and help them communicate what their body is feeling.
Right.
If they don't know, right?
Yes, it's a new time now, and
Definitely.
for me, I was diagnosed with ADD at 29. And if I
Okay.
would have known, like maybe when I was younger, or if my
difference,
the
yeah.
difference, because now
But our
Oh, yeah.
parents didn't even know
Yes.
really to look for those signs. I feel like we weren't
Absolutely.
talking about it.
Yes.
No.
And that's why I think this month is really nice, because it's autism awareness
Yeah.
and autism acceptance. And, it's
Ooh,
just,
that's good.
yeah, we're in a new time now. So
Yeah.
it's nothing wrong with kind of catching it early and accepting it early and seeing the change that can and will happen from that. Yes.
So speaking of that, did I just cut you off?
Oh, it can wait.
You sure?
Yep.
The manual, I think sometimes runs a little behind the leading research, which is kind of how science works anyway, because it takes a while for things to be adopted across the board because they're going to be closely examined. But how do you feel about the word disability as it ties to, 40
good question.
when I got my ADHD diagnosis. So I did actually have to grieve, and it's feels silly to say that when we're talking about something as with as much more impact as being a parent and facing it for your child. Ooh, whole different ball game.
Oh, yes.
And yet, in that little bit of experience, what you just said really resonated with me, because what I had to grieve was any what ifs that wanted to go through my brain of like, what if I had known? What if we had known? The endless list of things that runs through your mind of things that might have been different. All kinds of traumas that might not be there. If you had known, if it had been broken relationships. Then my mom battled guilt, which is in my mind somewhat silly because they weren't empowered. You said different time.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I get it as a parent.
Yeah.
So then my mom was battling guilt. So my point is that grieving about what could have been, what might have been. I mean, I'm assuming that plays into what you might grieve when your child gets a diagnosis. I don't know. I'd be interested in that. But also, how do you feel about the word disability?
That's a good question.
Well, how I grieved was, I really had to learn, like, it's easier said than done, but to let it go, because there's so much going on in the present, and I had to just say, like, if I keep thinking about what if,
Yeah.
I would just be stuck in that past. And so that's in my rear view mirror.
Come on.
Good.
And I have to just focus on the front view.
Come
Yeah.
on.
So, and the word disability, it's very hard for me to say that Abigail's autism is a disability.
Yeah.
I think that's just the definition of it. I think all kids with autism or on the spectrum are geniuses in their
They're
own
so
ways.
gifted,
They
yeah.
are very gifted.
It's like a new level, yeah.
Absolutely. And it takes people to see them differently, accept them, and embrace them to truly bring out their gifts.
Right.
Because I think they can do extraordinary things. I know Abigail has a lot of gifts, and I'm sure kids with autism, ADD, Asperger's, they have amazing gifts. So if we can just see them differently, I think that'll help them feel more available to be able to display those. For
Yeah.
sure.
The confidence to use
Absolutely.
what.
Absolutely.
That's beautifully said, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I was going to say before, just as a church family, since, this is for the huddle and everything, just Laura had sent me some videos before we recorded of basically a child with autism their experience of, and in one of the videos, the child is at the mall. And in the video, it's kind of a stressful video to watch because it's like, you know what I mean? And it's like, this person's crinkling a bag and this person's in your face and this person's doing it. And it's like very intense to watch. And then just imagining a child like going through that in everything that they do throughout the day, right? But on a whole nother level, then I just envisioned like a child experiencing life on that level, walking into Sunday morning church with their parent, mom or dad, and the parent trying to introduce the church to them as somewhere safe and wonderful and loving in the presence of God and what all that entails. But while it's kind of like a very overwhelming experience for them, and how do we as the church family, church body, whether they're in like main service, how do we like show grace for that and even accommodations that might be needed? Like, I know we have the cry room, but even in there, it can be a little maybe overwhelming for them. So maybe like accommodations in Sunday school or whatever it is. Like, what is your thoughts or feelings on that? And do you feel any way like having her in service? Like, is there anything you'd want to like tell the church family that we could do to be more
mindful?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
She when I do bring her into church service, because she's at the moment having a little hard time in Sunday school. When I bring her in, there are some times where she does become overwhelmed with the volume. You know, so I do bring some headphones to accommodate her.
That could be on me.
There are some times where, you know, she likes to spin. She's real soothed with music.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but there are some times where I do have to step out and I have to take her for a walk. And, you know, right now with her being nonverbal, like I am all for any sounds she makes, any type of verbal
100%.
communication.
You don't want to silence her.
Yes, I really try not to silence, or she does not. Kids with autism have a hard time understanding, you know, when to be, you know, pick up on social cues that it's time to like lower a voice or it's time, you know, to be silent.
Of course,
you know. So having some understandings that, you know, the children may not have bad behaviors, it may just be something they cannot control.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
And having a little grace on the parents as well.
With the level in which you're navigating.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
You know, the parents cannot control that. You know, it's not the parents' fault. You know, and it's definitely not the child's fault for sure.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How do you feel you have been received in our church specifically? You know, and the answer could be, it could have to do with society overall, restaurants, whatever, but just has there been an overarching tone to your experience of sitting in our service with a child that may display some unexpected behaviors? Has that been harder or easier because of the way you've experienced our interaction with that? Like, anything you want to say about that?
Yes. I've been completely loved by the people at Promised Land. Ever since, I mean, they know Nabi since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I love how they interact with her as if, you know, she was a normal, typical child. I love how they talk to her, how they give her some space, you know. Sometimes when she's not, you know, ready for a hug or she's not ready for, you know, any attention. But I do love it. You know, there are some times where I get some questions, and my thing is, one thing I want to comment on is it's okay to ask questions, you know, not just to me, but to anybody with a child with a disability. However, kind of to be more aware of the setting when to ask questions, you know, because sometimes if she's having a meltdown and somebody's asking me, well, why is she doing that? It's a natural mother instinct for me to kind of quickly get defensive.
Of course.
Versus, you know, being...
As you should.
Yes, being, you know, explaining the situation.
That's good.
Yes. So.
That's good. That's. I'm so happy you said that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that introduces the human element. We expect perfection from somebody who is already overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's completely
with
unreasonable.
our unreasonable
Yeah.
not reading the room request of like seeing that, hey, this is a mother who is trying her absolute best with their child. Park your judgment.
Right.
Don't over spiritualize things.
Yes.
There's some things that are natural that we're working through, and we can partner in prayer with them as well. But you know what? God made this little baby just how he made this little baby. And there's nothing that we need to focus on to try to point out as a detraction or a subtraction from their goodness, from what God has already poured into them.
Absolutely.
Can I say something about that? That I'm, you're the parent here, so I don't want to overstep. At the same time, I know I'm not wrong on this. For the love of everything holy, remember that the child that you're talking about can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even though she's nonverbal, she understands.
Hears well.
She has a soul, and she has feelings.
Yes.
And so talking, asking a question, when you think they don't understand, they understand.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm very quick to defend, like, hey, we're not going to, I'm not going to
This isn't
discuss
the
this.
place.
Because she has to know you're safe.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And so
Wow.
I do believe nonverbal children. Absolutely. I mean, it's not I believe, it's actually proven that they do have, an understanding.
Yeah.
Yes. They just communicate differently.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I was talking with my kids last night, and at least 2 out of the 3 are neurodivergent, and in less obvious ways.
Yeah.
Which is a mixed bag, right? But the point is that even the statistics around a much milder expression of a neurodivergency mean that the average, like you'll know this is true just by your experience. The average 12-year-old with, for instance, ADHD has heard 20,000 more pieces of negative feedback from peers, which includes teachers, friends, relatives, but it does not include the daily critiques of parents. So without including
The parents. Wow.
parents are included, but only in their broader input, not in their day-to-day nitty-gritty, because that becomes almost incalculable.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting to see, as we kind of get more aware, how autism is portrayed, like in media or movies. Or I'm just kind of curious, what's been your experience and what you've noticed, and
Even some of the advocacy groups.
Right. Is it portrayed accurately? Do you feel are you seeing okay, whoever is producing this content is obviously kind of consulted or seen an experience with somebody with autism? I'm just kind of curious, what have you seen? What has been just crazy? Is that's not real life or that? You know?
For sure. I think that when I got Abigail's diagnosis, I was like, man, what a time to have a child with autism. How it's so out there now, and so autism has a voice now.
Okay.
I'm
So
like,
good.
oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I see on TikTok or
Right.
on the now new movies, and I love it. I think it's very amazing.
Yeah.
It's very soothing and reassuring
Yeah.
to see these things. However, the thing that I've learned is, when I would read about autism and, for example, nonverbal autism, sometimes they can say, if your child does not talk by, 5 years old, or 7 years old, they're, not going to talk for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And, I kept reading those things, or, your child may have, start Googling things, your child may have a shortened lifespan because of having autism, or your child may, and I had to when that ties into my faith, I had to believe that, you know what, I need to take a break from reading this. This is not God.
Ooh, that's
I know that she is a miracle, and a miracle can and will happen.
Right.
And whatever it may come, it's going to happen.
That's so good.
So, there you have to limit yourself.
Having the knowledge, but applying the faith.
Yes, absolutely. Apply the faith.
Yeah.
And then, also having the wisdom and understanding, I see why they say these things, but yeah, so I think my only suggestion to a parent who has an autistic child is, have wisdom to understand, okay, maybe this is enough for tonight. You know, this is enough
Right.
researching, you know.
Right.
And then open it up when you do need it. You know, there was a time where I needed to see it. I was a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit burned out from her diagnosis. And I needed to, you know, refresh myself, you know, and I started reading a book, you know, about being a mom of an autistic child. And that helped me. So, yes, that's how I feel about
That's
I love
so
that.
good.
it. Yeah.
That's such a good word for believers anyway. Be
Yeah.
careful when you're just drinking in media on
Everything
a
the world
topic.
has to say about
If you
it,
don't
yeah.
come up for air to an extent, your soul can drown.
Absolutely.
And-
Absolutely.
yeah.
I love how you even touched on something else, though. It's like just because it happened with them doesn't mean it happens with me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the law of exception.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we, as believers, we definitely can operate inside that. This it happened with you, but it doesn't have to happen with me.
And
Not at
because
all.
as he thinketh in his heart, so
So
is
is
a
he, yeah.
man,
Yeah.
we've got to be careful with what we do allow to become our framework.
What we
of-
agree with.
Yes.
Yeah, what we
Yeah.
come into agreement
Yeah,
with.
what we
Absolutely.
agree with.
Words are spells.
Yeah.
Yes. Words are very powerful.
That's
Yes.
so good.
Yes.
You know, yes, no, or mid on Autism Speaks. Is that a decent source?
With limits.
Okay.
Yes. With limits.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, my best source, I think, has for, you know, any advice that I need is actually seeing documentaries of kids with autism speak, you know, about, you know, what they've gone through.
Come on now. Hearing it from the
From
yeah.
those-
Yes.
Self,
From
yeah.
from
Right.
myself has actually helped me understand a lot. One that I just saw last night when I was looking at it was a child was talking about how he felt of his sensory overload. And he was at a park and he's like, you hear the birds, you hear the wind, you hear the I'm so sorry, let me restart. He was at a park and he was like, you know, you can hold a conversation like this. But when I'm at a park, I'm hearing the wind, I'm hearing the birds, I'm hearing the dog, I'm hearing the car, and it's hard for me to concentrate. You know, so seeing it from their perspective and hearing it has been really helpful. Seeing like vlogs of moms with autistic childs has been really nice, you know.
Yeah.
So kind of just seeing it from them versus like an actual website, you know, it's
That
yeah.
personal.
It's a personal touch to it. Yes.
Letting people speak for themselves is really powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You touched on something there that I think is important for people to understand. The neurotypical mind has a very effective filter, and I can't think of the scientific name for it right now, but a very effective filter where over 90% of everything you see, hear, taste, feel, touch, your subconscious mind absorbs it
Yes.
and blocks your conscious mind from having to engage it. For instance, I haven't noticed until this very moment the feel of the couch that I'm sitting in.
Yes.
And I already tend to notice way more than a lot of people, but I don't notice this.
Yeah.
But there are many people that have very strong opinions, especially with, neurodivergent people tend to have very strong opinions about certain textures and I think people might really benefit to understand that there are a lot of people that don't have that filter, or they have it at a much lower activity level, so they don't get to not feel the chair. They don't get to not smell the air. They're taking it all in.
Yes.
At the same time,
Right.
their conscious mind is having to engage it, and it is unbelievably overwhelming. And the poor little Pentecostals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes. And and the one thing when it comes to like sensory and this, autism spectrum is one of the school psychologists I work with, she says, we're all on the spectrum. And
Yeah.
somewhat we all have sensory preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
good.
some people like to listen to music super loud, and like,
Yeah,
for
that's
example,
me.
I don't like to listen to music too loud. It's
Mm-hmm.
too overwhelming for me, Some people like some jeans, some people don't like jeans,
Mm-hmm.
the feel of them.
Yeah.
Some people have taste preferences. Some people like salty food. Some people like not salty food. So
Right.
having understanding that we are all different in our own ways.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a child with autism has been really enlightening for me.
Amen.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
if we can think of it like that, I think that it'll really will help with acceptance.
Really show some grace because you don't have everyone's experience, and there might have been a time when it was okay or not okay. It was never okay. There might have been a time when it was understandable for people to assume that, you know, a child that's acting out in a dramatic way or you know, speaking at an inappropriate volume or whatever, that child, you know, just needs a good whooping, and, you know, where's the parent, you know, happening right in front of mom and all that stuff. There may have been a day when it was understandable for that to be the first
Yeah.
assumption.
Yes.
But if that is still your first assumption now,
It's a problem.
you're being willfully ignorant.
Absolutely.
You need to read up,
Yeah.
pay attention to some things, because love dictates that,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think we're in a time where it's, you know, people like me who have a child with a disability are wanting to include them in things.
Yeah.
I want her to go to Sunday school.
Yes.
I want her to participate, you know, in children's choir. You know, I envision it when I go to the church.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
see it. And so if we can
Come on
be
now.
less critical of, you know, of children who are different, or, you know, even adults that are different, you know, in their own ways, you know, and be more accepting and understanding people are different, you know, those visions can come to life, you know.
Amen.
So
Laura, thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming. This was so good. And we're going to close up now. Do you have...
You had a remark.
I had one little remark. Yeah. But I don't want to like take us over. But I think one of the things you said that I just want to re-highlight is what you said about not wanting to suppress Abigail's voice, and in doing so miss the giftings
Yep.
that the autism has brought.
Come on.
Her special giftings that she has as an autistic child. I mean, the level of knowledge that they have in their minds and their abilities. And I just think that that can so align with the church as a whole.
Amen.
The church body, and how sometimes we can be so quick to shut down a voice that's not our preference, or not in the volume that we like, or not in the style of preaching, or whatever it may be, shutting down voices because they're not happening in our preferred way.
Right.
And in so doing, missing out on incredible giftings. I mean, the Bible says that we are given gifts that we're supposed to use in the church body, right? And so I think that we have a tendency too to just do that in the church as a whole, you know?
yes,
I love it.
So
yes,
that was just a little side note.
that is yes. I never thought of it
Side
like that,
sermon,
but you're right. Yes,
I just think you've brought so much incredible knowledge to us today.
And I know we ran a few minutes over for it, but it's well worth it because we're talking about awareness, and if the body is not aware of
Yeah.
a need, it's very hard to address that need.
yes,
Would you say that it's fair to say that the church still is playing catch up overall on how we minister to children and parents, and even eventually the conversation has to get to when the child becomes an adult? So wouldn't it, I think it would be fair to say we're playing catch up. We've got a long way to go to know how to integrate that.
yes.
We wouldn't be
Yeah.
having this conversation if we were
Right.
where
Right.
we needed
If we
to
were
be.
where we needed to be.
Yes. Yes.
And that's why it was so controversial when The Chosen decided to make one
Matthew.
aspect of Matthew's personality that he's on the spectrum. And it is only a potential explanation for how we got Matthew's contribution to the Bible, but it's a pretty good potential explanation because it explains a lot about Matthew's perspective. So it was a smart play in terms of an artistic choice. Have you seen it?
No, I'm not actually.
Oh, you're going to have to check
Yes.
it out. The Chosen.
And we
yeah.
want your opinion
Yes.
because obviously
Yeah, I was going to
we
actually
have
mention
unique-
that. Yeah, this is very curious.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
to-
think if the church is not the place where we can find out why God gave us people with these giftings, where is, right? And that's what I wanted to say. And I'm so thankful that you made the comment you did, because I feel like for us, just speaking pastorally, I feel like as a church body, I want us to rally around.
Yes.
That, you know, you're not the only parent or family dealing with this, but you are the representation right now of that need that we're most connected with, and we want to rally around that and build a philosophy of ministry that is most effective with that and learn. And so that's why I asked at the beginning about the term disability, because I understand that there is an actual disability in it, especially depending on how far on the spectrum you may be. But I feel like a lot of that, the reason that becomes a disability is because of how it interacts with society.
Yes.
We live in a society.
Yeah.
And we can all say, with much milder conditions, if neurodivergence is any part of your experience, you know society was not built to accommodate that.
Yes.
And so I feel like, but the church is built to accommodate. This goes to suffer the little children to come to me. All of these things the church is perfectly built to that. And so it makes me think every time I think of the word disability, because I hope that there comes a day when we use the word difference.
That's what I was thinking about right now, actually. Yes.
Right?
Yes, it's seeing the world differently.
Different.
Yeah.
It's a different way of being in the
all it
world.
is. That's
It's
all it is.
literally all it is.
It's a different brain. It's a different, I mean, we're all different in our own ways. This is just one that doesn't
One
fit into
version
society.
of that. Yeah.
The disability is in how it dovetails with society.
Yes.
Right.
But it's such a sensitive thing, because the child is going to have a tendency to internalize that term disability and make it a fundamental part of their understanding of themselves. When it's really describing a relationship with society, right?
How you interface with the world around.
And so there's an opportunity for the gospel to shine there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so it just makes me think of the concept of a golf handicap, and we'll just close out with that thought. People say, what's your handicap when you go to play a round of golf? And the reason they're asking is because they use an average of the performance on your last several games to decide, you know, how many strokes over par or under par to assign to you as like your grace. Some people are, if you're playing with Tiger Woods, he's going to have to come in a little under par to be considered at par, because it's just not fair. It's a way of letting everybody play together.
Be on the same field.
Because then somebody else gets extra strokes over par.
Yeah.
And so now everybody can play because we're showing grace.
Grading on a curve.
It's right. And it's not the same on every course. So somebody's handicap doesn't buy them the same number of strokes over or under par at a world tour course as it does in our little club. Our little country club might only have to give you a few, but somewhere else would have to give you several strokes. To grace, you're showing grace, and it allows everybody to mesh together and run the same course together, and everybody to have a sense of completion and inclusion and bring their gift to the table.
Yes.
And so because it is a different way of being, when we talk about the handicap of it, the disability of it, what we're saying is, when we're playing this course, we need to assign some extra grace, not because this person is not as able, but because we will miss out on their gift.
Yes.
They will not be a part of our group. They will not bring their dynamic to the table if we cannot understand how to interface and assign some extra credit there. We can do that in the church, because that's what we're called to.
I love that.
Amen.
Let's do it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We love you guys. Thank you,
opening
Laura,
up.
for being
You
here
did
and
awesome.
sharing with us. That was incredible. See y'all Sunday.
See ya.